All right, we're going to continue on with our discussion of lesson 9.4. It's important that you're also aware of the zero product property in addition to the square root property of equality. The zero product property is really just a derivation from the multiplicative property of zero. And if you remember the multiplicative property of zero, all that says is that if we have something times zero, the product will always be zero. So we understand the power of zero through multiplication. So the zero product property allows us to say if we have something, we can go ahead and call it A, times something, let's just call it B for now. If we have A times B equal to 0, then what must that mean? Then either A has to be equal to 0 or B has to be equal to 0. And that's a super important property when we're trying to solve quadratics. So I could have a pretty basic quadratic like this. I could have 8b squared minus 16b is equal to 0. All right, that's terrific. The step one when we're factoring, you want to go ahead and, we're solving through factoring, you want to go ahead and factor this side of our equation. And the first step to factoring is pulling out the GCF. The GCF in this situation is 8b. And then what's left over is b minus 2. Okay, so this is a perfect candidate for the zero product property. We have something, 8b times something else, b minus 2, something times something is equal to 0. So what does that mean? That means that 8b must be equal to 0, or that means that b minus 2 must be equal to 0. So we can say that b has to be equal to 0, or we can solve the other side here. B has to be equal to 2. So b equals 0 and 2. All right, so we can go in a step further than that. You've got some fantastic factoring skills. I could give you something like x squared plus 5x equals 24. Okay, the first important thing for us, step one this time, is to take a look at this 24. It's hanging out over on the other side of the equation. We want to go ahead and move everything over. We want to set the equation equal to 0. That would be a good first step because we want to use the zero product property. So we've got to have 0 on one side of the equation. So we're going to move this 24 over. We'll try to keep our leading coefficient positive. So it's best just to move that guy over. Our leading coefficient is positive. That makes factoring much easier. And then we have this trinomial set equal to 0. So you've learned a lot about factoring. Now we need to find the factors of negative 24 with a sum of 5. And if you start thinking about those factors, well, 8 times negative 3 is going to get me to negative 24. And if I add them, that gives me the positive 5. So in factored form, this is x plus 8 times x minus 3 is equal to 0. Using the zero product property, that means that x plus 8 is equal to 0, or that means that x minus 3 is equal to 0. Then we're just going to solve each of these equations. X is equal to negative 8. We would add 3 to both sides of this guy, or x is equal to 3. Final answer, we've solved this quadratic through factoring and the zero product property. X is equal to negative 8, or x is equal to 3.